is Eric Marks. I'm on the MPSE Board of Directors. First, a few MPSE announcements. The spring edition of our magazine, MPSE Wavelength, is in members' mailboxes and is also online. You can read the full digital edition of this magazine at mpse.org/wavelength. At the MPSE store, you'll find all sorts of apparel, as well as mugs, water bottles, stationery, tote bags, and more. Head to mpse.org/store to see what best suits your style. On our YouTube channel, you'll find lots of great sound advice events from the past few years. Head there to learn more from the sound teams behind Better Call Saul, Mr. Robot, Back to the Future, Jerry Bruckheimer films, Halo Infinite, and more. And thank you for coming to tonight's very special sound advice event. Way back in 2001, the independent film landscape looked a lot different than it does today. Access to filmmaking tools was very limited. Science fiction, VFX-heavy films were much more expensive to make, and there was zero chance of a film eventually finding an audience on a streaming platform at the time. Back in the 1990s, a young writer-director named Richard Kelly had ambitious plans to upend all of that with his first feature film. Donnie Darko premiered at the 2001 Sundance Film Festival, and months later, the film was bought by Newmarket Films to be released in late 2001. The film didn't become a major hit, though, until it hit DVD the following year, and it quickly grew into a cult classic. So much so that the song Mad World reached #1 on the charts in the United Kingdom more than 2 years after Donnie Darko was released in theaters. And the film was extensively revised in a director's cut that was released theatrically in 2004. The lasting legacy of this film is unique, as the film itself is many things at once. A science fiction film about time travel, a comedic social commentary on education and suburban life, a period film set in the late 1980s, a dark tale about isolation and mental health, and a story about teenagers refusing to be pigeonholed by their circumstances. For filmmakers, I also think that the making of this film is incredibly inspiring as a story about perseverance and overcoming the odds at every turn. Fans of the movie won't soon forget Frank the Bunny or how perfectly that song Mad World communicates the themes of the film. But how did all the sounds for this film come to life? To help learn about all of that, I'm honored to be joined this evening by some very special guests. Joining us tonight are supervising sound editor Vickie Rose Sampson, actor Beth Grant, who portrayed Kitty Farmer in the film, and the writer-director of the film himself, Richard Kelly. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Richard, first question for you. As you were writing this film, you were obviously visualizing what the film was going to look like, the locations, the cinematography, and all the actors' brilliant performances. How early on were you thinking about what the world of this film would sound like?
Well, I think it started probably with some of the pop songs. There was about 2 or 3 songs that were written into the script. The first one was In Excess, Never Tear Us Apart, which was the original song for the opening montage when Donnie's riding his bike home from school. And then we couldn't afford it after Sundance because we didn't have all the songs paid for at Sundance. So we had to kind of move some things around, and it got replaced with Echo and the Bunnymen, which is just as good, maybe better. Echo and the Bunnymen was also supposed to be at the party scene, but it got moved forward to the beginning because it was like we had very little money, and the distributor was like only going to let us have like 4 or 5 of the songs. So we had to so it was the NXS song, and then it was the Tears for Fears song at when Donnie jumps out of the bus. I knew that the opening note to Tears for Fears would start when his feet hit the ground, and then we would take him through the hallway. And at the end, when we arrive at the classroom with Drew Barrymore's character, who plays his English teacher, it would be like time flies, and we sort of ramp and speed up, and then the kids settle into class. So I had to like edit the song down to like 90 seconds to get from the beginning to the end in an organic way. So like those were sort of the anchor songs. And then there was Frank's voice, the rabbit's voice, which I knew was going to be this sort of like not just voiceover, but something supernatural and very psychological in Donnie's head. So those were like the sound anchors that I went with, and that everything kind of just sort of came from from there, from the music side of things, and then the atmospheric psychological stuff, which was anchored by James Duvall's voice, who played the rabbit, and his mysterious voiceover that guides Donnie out of the house and on his sort of night sleepwalking missions.
Incredible. And Richard, this was your, as we talked about, your very first feature film. What sorts of things did you and Vickie discuss in your initial spotting sessions? And also, did your USC film school background or early work experience help you going into these conversations?
I have very foggy memories of like everything because it was so long ago. I just remember it being a really intense experience putting all the sound together for this movie, because there were several iterations of mixing. Was when you get invited to the Sundance Film Festival, as we did. It was like around October of 2000 when we got the news that we had been admitted into the dramatic competition at Sundance, which is this huge honor. I was a first-time director, 25 years old, and it was just like, this is a big deal. And we were like probably the first movie at Sundance to have like digital effects. It sounds crazy, but this was going into the 2001 Sundance Film Festival. CGI was still only something that big studio films could afford. It was only becoming affordable at our budget level. And the movie was a $4.5 million movie, but it had a pretty good amount of CGI. And so we were just scrambling to get the movie finished. And that's when you get into Sundance, any independent filmmaker knows this, who's been to Sundance, you don't have a Christmas holiday, because you are in LA mixing and working your butt off to make sure your movie is just barely presentable for Sundance. And it's really stressful and it's really intense. And you're like mixing on Christmas Eve and stuff like that. I think we literally mixed on probably Christmas Eve. So that was the first go round, and so I just remember it just being a really overwhelming experience. I was very new at all of this, and we were doing a lot of kind of experimental things. And I was just really grateful to have all these really experienced people helping to guide me through it. Vickie and her whole team. We were at the name of the facility. I don't think it's there anymore.
Yeah, Wilshire Stages.
Yeah, it was Wilshire Stages, which is kind of in LA. It's like right, kind of near the Beverly Center. It's right in that like epicenter of all of LA. And I just remember it being this is really intense experience, because it was a wildly ambitious film that we were just scrambling to get finished, before Sundance. And we didn't have any of the pop songs paid for. The financier of the movie was really not that confident that they knew what even the movie was, whether it was even gonna. The fact that we got into the festival kind of gave the financiers of the movie like, oh, maybe this is actually a good movie. It was like they didn't quite understand what they had. So it was just like we had this ticking deadline that we had to meet and just try to put all the music in and get everything presentable, really. And then there was a whole nother process later in the summer after Sundance when Newmarket bought the movie, and we did one additional piece of photography. We added James Duvall to the Mad World montage when everyone's waking up and Mad World plays. James Duvall was not included in the original Sundance version. We didn't shoot that. And it was a great note actually from Christopher Nolan, and his wife, Emma, gave us the note. One of the great notes was to add him into the wake up montage. And we went and did that additional photography. So there was some editorial stuff and some moving songs around and stuff. So there was a significant new mix that happened again summer of 2001. And I'm sure Vickie probably has much more detailed memories, because I blocked a lot of it out. It's just sort of like a blur to me.
Well, one of the things that I remember really clearly was how when we first met, you said, look, I don't know much about sound, so I'm going to rely on you to teach me. And I thought that was so cool, because a lot of directors try to present themselves as knowing everything about everything. And then they tie themselves up in not letting new things come to them. You know, we get caught up in like temp love and temp sound effects, and to hear new things and to be open to hearing new things, whether it's dialogue or sound effects, is a brave thing to do and to admit. You know, it's like you said, look, I'm this is my first feature. I don't really know much about sound, but I hope you can teach me. You know, and I just love that attitude, and that's what's has stuck with me. And I tell students that a lot, like, you know, as directors, like, be open, you know, don't get stuck and bottlenecked, you know, with like it has to be this way or nothing, you know. And I like that about you all those years ago, and I'm sure you sound like you're still the same. You know, now to the audience here, I haven't seen Richard since we like left the movie. Beth, I've worked with a couple times on other things, but with Richard, yeah, I haven't seen him in what, 21 years or something.
Crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, part of and having gone to USC, and at USC, when you go to film school there, they have a class for everything. It's a very, very thorough curriculum. And I still want to go back and take more classes. You know, I never got to take the Alfred Hitchcock class, you know, some of the famous critical study stuff. But when you're in production, which was my major, because there was critical studies, production, and filmic writing. And then I think they had still photography, which I don't think exists anymore, but I was production. So I got to take all the sound classes with a professor named Thomas Homlin, I believe is his name. And that man is just a genius. And that class was so overwhelming and intimidating and kind of exhausting, but I still have like muscle memory from all the things that he taught us at USC, just the intricate minutia of sound on every, from capturing it to recording it to mixing it and to broadcasting it, the whole process of sound in cinema. He brought you through the entire process, and just with so much technical detail. It was just like at some point I felt like I was like taking AP calculus or advanced algebra or something. It was just so technical and complicated, but I didn't understand. There was so much of it that just went way over my head, but I kind of like absorbed it all, and I still like retain things. You know, I try to just get better as I get older in terms of understanding all the elements of filmmaking. And just like, I tell you, that class was just, I'll never forget it. I mean, I've forgotten a lot of it, but it's in here in the CPU in my brain somewhere, you know. But, and again,
it's all about how do you use sound to tell the story, you know. Like I always want to watch the movie just to watch the movie for the first time, because you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so I want to absorb what the filmmaker is bringing to the table. I don't want to sit there and go, let's see, that's going to be an ADR line, and that there's some Foley over there. You know, I want to just get the movie. And I tell you, when I first saw Donnie Darko, it was like, okay, you know, like you don't want to give anything away sound wise before you get to the end. And I think that was the big secret of it, even though there was like the slow-mo sequences, which I think at one point we actually had the sound of the slow-mo stuff. And when I rewatched the film last year, I didn't hear it, like the leaf blower and the trampoline. I remember, and the bicycle, I remember having all that in there, but it wasn't in the film that they showed at the Arrow. So I don't know, you know, it's the same with ADR, like with the actors. I mean, you know, you don't, when you're doing a film, you know, you don't envision, I'm going to have to redo that, unless you're Donald Sutherland, who likes to record everything really low so he can come back and loop it. But you know, yeah, he does that. But yeah, I mean, the muscle memory of sound, and also that there's sound is so subjective, you know, like what you think of as the things, what did we call those? The trails that you know, those water swirl things. What was it called again? I forget what it was called.
I think they were like liquid spears is what I
Yeah,
call them.
spears, right,
There's no
spears.
real name. It's
Right.
just-
So, you present a bunch of sounds to the director and you see it in context of the film. It's like, do you buy this? Do you like this? Should we add more elements? Because sound, sound is like pain, like when you're at the hospital and there's that chart with the pain levels. And that's how I think of sound. Like, is that, sound too green? Is it too intense? And then there's all the layers of sound that then create the whole piece that you're listening to, and of course the music. I mean, that Mad World, I actually did a short film a couple years ago, and she got permission to use that song. It was about gun violence, called Thoughts and Prayers, and it was just like the perfect song, and she petitioned to get it in there, and I was like, hey, we had that song in Donnie Darko. But yeah, it's a powerful song, and that's the hardest thing, I think, as a sound editor for these things is trying to interpret the intent of the director, like what should it sound like? And sometimes no sound is a sound, like taking out the sounds and putting either music or something else, is more believable to the story, and I think actors, when they come in to do ADR, it's what we're going to ask Beth about too, because the sound community doesn't really get to hear from other directors and other actors unless they're working with them about your process that you go through. I didn't want to take anything away from your questions, Eric, if you had other. Oh, okay.
No,
But
go ahead.
like for Beth, I mean, I just love sparkle motion. it's such a, it's such a great character in her. So what is it like for you when you come to a set and you want to make sure you're recorded well, but when you come to do ADR, do you like doing ADR? Do you get a way to reinterpret something on the ADR stage? Yeah.
I mean, I don't cheat like Donald Sutherland, but I must admit, I do enjoy it. And there have been instances, a guest star on a television show once that I had to loop the network decided they wanted my voice to be softer. And I walked in and I looked at all the lines. I said, wait a minute. And it was every line. I honestly don't remember doing ADR for Donnie Darko. Richard?
I feel like most of your stuff was production. I think for the most part, the live mixing that we had on Donnie Darko, I remember being quite good. Because the summer that we shot that movie so many years ago, in the year 2000, there was a commercial strike, meaning that commercials and like music videos, there was a strike that summer and they weren't making any commercials in LA that summer. So that was one of the reasons why we were able to shoot in LA. Because there was very early on talk about like, oh, we're gonna have to go to Toronto. A lot of people went to Canada back then because of tax stuff. Because of the commercial strike, all these crew members were just not working that summer, and they were in LA. And to be able to work on an independent film, and like go sleep in your bed every night and not have to go live in a hotel in Canada or something, was really attractive to a lot of people. So we got a lot of really high-end crew members on the film, including sound in our production sound mixers. And so when you're shooting in LA, you usually get really good production sound because there's a lot of local people.
It's funny because the Coleman Metz was your production mixer, and he was one of my former students.
Oh, great!
So that was really cool to have him on board for that. But I think Beth, you did some like additional ADR. You did. I don't think you did any replacement ADR. It was just like additional lines.
Well, I remember the pressure of Sundance, and I remember poor Richard. I mean, you guys, he was 25, and I remember Drew Barrymore would bring him a sandwich. You have to eat. She would hold the food in front of him. You have to eat, and you wore comfortable shoes, so you had that going for you. But he was just such a delight in every way. And he did have such a vision of what he wanted us to do. And yet he gave us freedom, which is such a, oxymoron. Is that the right word? Tell me. Y'all are much smarter than me. I'm just an actor. I say your words. So, but yeah, I do remember coming there, and Vickie, I can remember watching it. But the first time I saw it all the way through was at the CAA screening just before Sundance. And I was sobbing at the end. I loved it so much. I was so moved by it. And I just look at Richard. I just can't take my eyes off of him, even for the Zoom. I just love him so much. It's just one of my favorite. I mean, I've been in 3 Best Pictures and I've had such a lucky career, but this movie, it's just a miracle movie. It just is. And I'll always be grateful to you, Richard. I really will.
Well, thank you, Beth. And
I begged for this job, you guys. I begged for it.
I'll never forget your audition. It was amazing. It was
But
so
I did
amazing.
I said, instead of sparkle motion, I said miracles in motion.
It didn't matter. You already.
But then I said, you have to give me this job. I literally begged for the part. So
Yeah.
How did you find it? How did you get the part? Was it like your agent submitted you for it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Or our casting director was Joseph Middleton and his colleague Michelle Morris Gertz. They were our casting directors, and Joseph at the time had just done he'd done like Legally Blonde and like a lot of these sort of teen movies in the late 90s going into 2000. And we just got we were so, and again, shooting in LA, getting to shoot a movie in LA, you get all the local talent. You don't, even for like the little tiny parts. I've had this before where you're shooting a movie in like Boston. Sometimes your sound suffers because you're not necessarily getting the top of the line production sound mixers, or you have a line producer who does not want to fly production sound people. They don't want to pay for the plane tickets and the hotel rooms. So the corners can be cut when you're shooting in cities other than like the big production hub cities, whether it's a tax credit or whatnot. So getting to shoot in LA, you get a lot of the A+ talent that they all live in LA. So that in terms of casting, we were blessed with so many like younger actors who were just extraordinary. I mean, this was Seth Rogen's first film. He was just coming off of Freaks and Geeks. And I remember all the younger performers who were playing like the high school students, and even like some of like just the one line extras who had people who had one line here and there, or the others, kind of the sparkle motion girls, or the other teacher students in Donnie's class and stuff. They all like had gone to one of the big high schools where like Jake and Maggie went to high school. And so it was like the drama teacher from their high school showed up on set. Like it was like a proud like parent, like the first week of shooting at Loyola High School, which is just near downtown LA. It's like this beautiful old Jesuit high school. It's our first week of photography. The drama teacher from, is it Harvard Westlake? That's where Jake and Maggie went. So it was like the drama teacher from Harvard Westlake came to set. And he's like, oh, there's my student. There's my student. It was just like, I've employed like a lot of, LA drama kids, so.
Well, and it gives it an authenticity too, sound wise and acting wise, that it's, as authentic as possible, which is
I knew Jake since he was 3 years old. He was best friends with my nieces. And I remember at one point we're looking at each other and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're acting together. This is like the kid that we used to babysit and take to soccer games, and we taught theater games too. And now we take complete credit for his career, of course. But the sound, Vickie, really is, whatever it was you did together, you guys, is so delicious. I love sound so much anyway. I love when a car door opens, in a theater. It's just so yummy and delicious, and it really is one of the best sound designs I think of any film that I've been in.
Really... Mike Payne was the sound designer. I supervised the whole film, but I mainly concentrate on the production, dialogue, and the ADR. And Mike Payne was our sound designer. And he wasn't available to do this, but he sent me some notes, and he said he designed Frank's voice inside a software app called MetaSynth. And the voice was pitch shifted 4 different ways, and also a subtle phase shifting effect applied to each of those pitch shifts. Then in the mix, which was done by Chris David, we have a clip from him as well. In the mix, each pitch shifted voice was panned to its own speaker in the 5.1 theater, and the dry voice was played like up the center. I mean, we probably would do that in Dolby Atmos today if that was available, but we had, 5.1, which is left, center, right, and the surrounds. So, and then he also mentioned that Richard was, let's see, all the sound was scrutinized and enhanced beyond just the new restored scenes and visual effects for the DVD audience that came three years later. I guess that was your director's cut. Is that correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he said Richard was looking overall for a more serious tone, like background ambience effects were changed and added to enhance the mood. Sound effects were elevated for more impact. Lots of comic group ADR was removed. Score, the music score was heavily edited and repurposed. Beyond the storytelling additions and explanations, Richard saw this film as a sonic remix, much like was new and popular in the music industry at that time. Deleted Sundance scenes returned to the film, and several new visual motifs and visual effects were added. Probably 85 to 90% of the scenes changed sonically in some way, whether dramatically or subtly. I mean, I just remember like the impact of the thunder, and recreating the plane engine through the roof different times. Like sometimes there was, it's because the reality, we didn't want to give it away to the audience that it was, in the past. It was a tricky sound job in that sense, because you want to foreshadow, but you don't want it too much too soon.
Yeah, it's such a, there's so much minutia and detail that goes into this process, and like anything in making a film, you need more time. You always want more time, and time is money in the movie business. Like if you're on set, every hour costs a certain number of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. It's like, it's so expensive to make a movie. And it's the same thing when you're on a mixing stage. You only have a certain number of days, and each day has a certain number of hours, and you've got to wrap things up, and you got to get through your reels. You got to get through make your day. And I think so much of it is just making sure when you're there in the final mix, when it's all said and done, you've really just done so much of your homework, and you're really focusing in on what the movie really should be. And you're not just like making last minute changes or that you're just like all over the place. You should really be honing things in and focusing everything, up until the last minute. And, a lot of it is also kind of is budget related. And again, this is a long time ago, before so many things were just readily available online. I can only imagine how the sound effects library, sort of how that circumstance, it was so different back then, because nowadays you can just buy things or find things online so easily, and probably purchase or download things for free, or before you have to license them. But this was, again, in the year 2000, the internet was certainly existed, but it wasn't anything near what it was today in terms of what is available and how you can sort of, I'm working on right now. I'm doing all this previs right now, and I'm doing like all this previs in Photoshop, and I'm doing sound in Photoshop. Believe it or not, you can do sound in Photoshop. You can do so much in Photoshop now. And it's like just the stuff that's just available just online to download from sound effects libraries and websites to workshop and everything. It's just incredible. And the tools that you have at your disposal. So I don't know.
Well, and you shot on 35, right? You weren't even on digital then. So
oh yeah, we shot on anamorphic lenses, 35 millimeter.
Right. So, every shot, right now, like you could just print all your digital stuff if you want to, because there's no film, there's no developing. But back then you had to be so careful. I mean, how many shooting days did you have? Do you remember?
It was right around 28.
Wow.
It was just like the movie, just like the
Just
sort
like
of,
October 28th.
it was exact, so many crazy things happened while we were shooting the movie. Like,
Yeah.
but when we were shooting the last day of shooting was when we blasted the engine, the real jet engine, into the set of Donnie's bedroom, which was built elevated so it could smash through the roof and then into the floor. It was a real jet engine that we'd flown in from Arizona. It was hollow. We hollowed it out because it would have been too heavy, but they mounted it above the set and it was blasted with like thousands of pounds of air pressure over, like, in 1 second it smashed through that set. So we had like 3 cameras filming it and everything. And so they actually couldn't get the forklift with the engine into the warehouse. So it kind of pushed it by 1 day, and it ended up being exactly 28 days. But we only had one chance to get that. That was all shot in high frame rate and everything. So there was no, obviously, real sound of that engine smashing through the set. So all that had to be recreated. And
Yeah, balsa wood doesn't quite cut it when it
right.
comes to.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it was so many wild things we were doing with this movie, because we had musical sequences and slow motion and very dreamlike musical sequences, and then we had psychological voiceover, the liquid spears and the time vortexes, and it was just a lot of really kind of experimental stuff that maybe people hadn't combined these kinds of things all together in that kind of way before. So we were kind of like a little bit of like undiscovered, uncharted territory. And we needed anyone who was along for the ride in this movie until the end had to have kind of an adventurous spirit and needed to believe in what we were doing. And I was grateful for those people that were along through the whole ride and that stuck with me, because, you know, when you're that young and you're making a movie, there's a lot of people who are kind of looking at you like,
Yeah, but you still had to keep your vision, as opposed to being influenced by more experience or whatever from other people. And I think that's what you did really well. You stayed true to your own vision through the whole process. I mean, yeah, we all get influenced. Let's do a family friend screening. Let's see what, everybody says about it. And, certainly there's good ideas. You learn to, throw them out if you listen to them nicely, and you throw them out if they don't work for you. But I mean, nowadays we have plugins like on Avatar. And it's from Peter Jackson when he did the Beatles documentary. There's a thing called machine augmented learning. It's a program. It's not available to us sound editors yet, just a few, but it can take out overlaps. Like if an actor overlaps another actor, it learns your voice and it pulls them apart. I know. It's like a total game changer. In the past, we would have had to loop that or look for an alternate take, and then you suffer the performance choices. But this thing can literally pull, like they had a scene in Avatar with these plastic balls in a water tank for the motion capture. It suits of the the actors, and the glare from the water was messing up the marks, and so they put these white plastic balls to cover up the water, but then you had white plastic balls and the actors are trying to act and the water's slushing all over the place. They were able to separate the ball sound from the water noise from the voices, and those actors did not have to be ADR'd for that scene. I mean, me looking at that scene, I'd go, of course it has to be ADR because you got all this overlap. But no, I mean, there's so many amazing things happening in sound, but it still comes down to what sound supports the story the best.
Yeah, well, and again, I will say this: having had both experiences, I've had wonderful production sound mixing where like all the actors' voices are crystal clear. There's barely any ADR. Like none, like barely any need for ADR unless it's something creatively that we wanted to change. But like, I've had like the wonderful experiences, but I've had some other experiences where there's just lots where you have to shoot a movie in blizzard snowstorms and like 0-degree weather and stuff, where the weather is just, it makes it really hard in inclement weather, for example, to mic
Or
people.
anything with generators, rain
Yeah,
machines, all
and
that
it's just
stuff. Yeah.
freezing cold. It's just freezing cold and miserable. And it's just hard to do your job. And it's hard, certain things like mixing production sound when you're outside at 4 a.m. and it's -10 degrees out or something, you're not necessarily going to get the best production sound. It's just the reality of the elements, you know? And so that's really frustrating when you're not dealing with the crystal clear actors, because those performances on set, when an actor is delivering their lines, you'll never get that time back again. It's a magical time where you're with those actors for a limited number of hours, and then you got the hair and the makeup and everything and the whole
Well, and
circus
you
up and running.
worked with them on those performances, and that's what you want captured on film. You can't bring them, expect people to come in months later when their heads in another role. I mean, that's what I was asking Beth about, like, how frustrating is it? I mean, of course, if you have to redo your whole performance because they wanted you to be softer. I mean, but well,
it can be an opportunity to make it better. And if I'm sure if the director sees it, or you guys see it and you go, oh, this could be a little, I've massaged many a performance and been very grateful to have the opportunity. So
no, that's a really good point. I mean, that's what happened on Speed, the movie, not the drug. Because
that's my joke, by the way.
I use that joke all the time too.
Give me credit.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, because everything had to be looped on the bus because it was a moving bus, and that was the director's choice, because he wanted the motion to be in the actors' faces and the noise floor to be high enough that the actors would have to talk over it. And those are all, creative decisions. But he came in with the actors with the thing of, hey, we're going to make this better. And Keanu, I think on that film, he just come off of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And so he wanted to, and here in Speed, he's supposed to be the hero, so he made his voice a little deeper, more authoritative. And he had a chance to do that through ADR. So it was a real blessing instead of oh God, we have to do ADR,
Here's an ADR question for you all. So this is because we have such an interesting group here. I'd love to hear both sides of this. So how was Richard to work with on the ADR stage compared to other directors? For both Vickie, Beth, and then from Richard's side, what was ADR like on this film?
Beth, you want to go first?
Well, as I say, I don't even remember doing any ADR, so it must have been very pleasant.
I feel like the ADR that I remember, well, obviously we had James Duvall and his voice, his big booming echoey voice, which we did some of it live on set just so we could have it to play with. But we brought him in to do all his voice stuff. I do remember the scene with Jake and Holmes Osborne in Act 1 when they're driving in the Ford Taurus and they almost run over Grandma Death, played by Patience Cleveland, and Kitty also almost runs over, and she gets out and moves her across that whole scene. I think Beth ADR'd some of that because we were shooting from way up on the hill. That hill
makes sense.
Where they're shooting the BB guns. It was way up. We had the camera way up there. We were on a very long lens shooting you in the in your minivan, where you jump out of the minivan and you move Patience.
That's right.
So that was definitely looped kind of ADR stuff. But again, because we were so far away, you were just sort of recreating what you were generally were saying on set. But I don't even think we were recording sound when we did that shot because we were so far away and that we were shooting so fast and we were losing the light. And sometimes you just don't have time to record sound at all.
Well, if you know enough about it, you can always know that you can fix things and add things later. I always say, people always say, oh, fix it in post. I say, fix it in fix it on the set before it gets broken, and then you can always add things later too. And, when you get a chance to marinate with the movie.
If I listen, any movie that I make from here on out, one thing that I will make sure is that in the budget, you spend the money for the best possible production sound mixers on set who know how to remove all the noise, all the background noise, whether it's like a generator or a leaf blower or traffic or squeaks on the floor of a set, all sorts of stuff that can just ruin your production sound. There are some incredibly gifted people that know how to just dial that stuff out. And I don't I'm sure the technology has gotten even better to remove stuff like that, but it is really heartbreaking when you have an actor giving a wonderful performance and all of a sudden the sound is not usable, or there's artifacts or noise attached to it. And it's really heartbreaking for me as the director, but for everyone. And to have to ask the actor to come in and do ADR on something that was wonderful on set, it's a bummer. And sometimes it's just the elements are just not there. They're not in support of your vision. If you're shooting in a blizzard at 4 a.m. in 0 degrees, it's just going to be hard. It's just, that's the reality. Or if you're shooting in crazy, like on a speeding bus, it's like, what are you going to do? The movie's called Speed, and
I bet today if I took that production track, we could clean it up. But
so
because
it
wasn't cleaned up, it gave the actors a chance to really do things differently.
So Vickie, would you say the technology that exists now, more than 25 years later on a film like Speed, how much of the production audio that still exists in a vault somewhere from 1993, 1994, when that film was shot, that has all the noise underneath it, if you brought that into with today's tools and today's incredible technology, what percentage of it would be fixable, I guess, that it wasn't with the technology back then?
I think shockingly, it would probably be 95%.
Wow.
Yeah, especially with this MAL software, this machine augmented learning. There's also another program called VX Clarity Pro, which can literally take rain out of a background and leave the voice without any artifacting. Because the problem with plugins and noise reductions is that it starts hitting the voice, the where the waveform is for the voice, and then you can tell, oh, it's been treated. But this MAL thing and VX Clarity Pro you can get really close. I actually have the production track from Speed because I show like the before and the after. And I swear one of these days I'm going to put it in my Pro Tools and see what I can take out. But again, I will, again, it's like, because of that problem, it created a different type of solution that would have been overlooked had we just cleaned it up, unless somebody said, hey, we could make his voice deeper or something. I mean, we could pitch shift it, but that's not the same thing as vocalize. Or we could make Beth sound softer in this version, but no, it's not volume. It's like there's projection and there's volume. And of course there's sync and performance. Those are all the elements of ADR. Whether you're going to enhance something with additional exposition or additional dialogue, or change something like, when you're escorting Grandma Death across the thing, come on, honey, or whatever you said to her, you can improv stuff where you don't see your mouth moving. But yeah, so I would say like 95%. What about you, Eric? Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, but that bus kind of stuff nowadays is a lot easier to clean out. It's a very high percentage can be probably, I don't know how the production sounded, but a lot of that stuff now, you can really, these tools separate the voice from other things so much better now.
Remember, if things are separate, we can always add things to it. I mean, this is what I used to say till I found out about this machine augmented learning, that you can't pull things apart, but you can always add sounds if things are separate. And that's what we do as sounders. We layer everything so much, but we have separation so we can control the volume and the placement in the theater and the speaker, and manipulate it the way we want. But if it's all married together, like don't shoot a scene with music in it over your main actors, because you can't unmarry them except if you have this MAL software.
Yeah, that is a tricky thing when you're doing like a scene in like a nightclub or a party where there's music blasting.
Mm-hmm.
You need clean sound, so you almost need to direct the actors to speak as though there's music playing, or you need to blast the music for a little bit so they can
Exactly.
Then turn it off and then cut it off and then let them keep talking at that level.
Or you could put earbuds in them and pump the music into that, and then they have to talk above the noise floor. See, that's the thing with Speed, because they were on a moving bus, even though it was only going from first to second. And of course, the conceit is that it had to stay above 60 to not blow up, right? So you could always hear the gears going like that. But Jan de Bont wanted the motion in the actors' faces and the noise floor to be there. But yeah, you got to talk above the noise floor, and it's hard. It's like being on an ADR stage. You start out at a certain volume, and then you're on the stage all by yourself, and pretty soon your voice is he's going down and down and down because you feel self-conscious about it. But I mean, I have a quick actor question, because I've noticed this on sets. When the camera is close to you, you tend to speak softer than when the camera is in a master shot, which is funny to me because the microphone's at the same spot, but we're so used to, having like distance. Oh, I have to talk over there, versus I'm going to talk here. And sometimes you can't intercut master shots and close-ups because the volume is, the projection is different. But I don't know.
This is really important. Like what you're describing right now. This is why it's so important to have an amazing production sound mixer who's really experienced, who's on set with you, who's constantly coming over and saying, Richard, we need to make sure that, that's constantly, there should be a constant communication between the director and the production sound mixer, because that means that person is really on it. They're really, coming over and letting you know, I'm not sure if that take was usable. I really think you should do one more. There's a little squeak in the floorboard during that one line in that performance. You could probably just do another take. And a lot of people, I don't want to say they just like, toss that aside, but no, the we'll fix it in post thing can really come back to haunt you later on, where you really wish you would have taken that extra time to do just one more take on set, because man, production sound is so important. It is so important. I mean, it's literally like half of the experience. It's 50% audio, 50% visual. It's people. Yeah, it's so.
I mean,
important.
if the DP came to you and said, "I'm sorry, we can't shoot this anymore. The sun went down," and you say to, "Well, I don't care. Just get it done." That's kind of what happens with sound people. They go, well, you had an airplane overhead during your Western shot here. And I don't care. We'll fix, this doesn't matter. But, it's always better to do the right thing first and then use the fix it tools later when you have to.
Yeah, 100%. Richard, I read that your goal with this film was to seduce the audience from the film's opening shot. And you mentioned that, how the music has these sound designy things within the music, like heavy drones, these long tones. Was this blurred line between sound and music for you important in trying to seduce the audience?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I use that quote, it's sort of like you want to, you always say when you go to a movie, you have 100% of the audience there. And then if your movie is sort of not firing on all cylinders, you start to lose people, and it starts to, you want to hold the audience and you want to grab them from the opening. And we knew that with this movie, with the opening shot of Jake on that mountaintop, which was the San Andreas Crest Mountains. I knew that opening shot had to be very seductive and very beautiful and very kind of epic, and I think it was a little bit inspired by it's a different kind of shot, but the introduction of Montgomery Clift in a film called A Place in the Sun with Elizabeth Taylor, and the actress who plays Shelley Winters plays Montgomery Clift's wife, and Elizabeth Taylor is the woman he falls in love with. And there's this opening shot of Montgomery Clift on the side of a road coming up behind him, and then he turns into camera, and it's this wonderful introduction to this beautiful movie star. So with Jake's opening shot in the movie, I knew I wanted this beautiful vista of the Los Angeles mountains, and Jake's going to be laying on the cement in his pajamas with a bike. It's very surreal. Like, how did he get up here? What's going on? And we wrap around him and reveal his face as he sits up and everything. So that was, I knew the opening shot had to really lure people in. And so that was the very first shot of the very first day of principal photography on this movie. And
I remember I had to find very idealized birds. I remember that.
Well,
and wind and forest, to kind of creep in with the thunder,
Yeah, and I know we were able to sort of develop a lot because we had a little bit more time and doing the kind of the director's cut, and we were able to really amplify all that stuff. And again, having a bigger budget and having more time to do all this stuff, it's so important. And even if you do have a low budget, I'm sure it's not about cutting corners in my mind. And again, I can't speak to the technical stuff that Vickie and others do, because I'm just the director trying to explain my vision. But the more you can just prepare in advance and do so much work in advance, so when you're on that mixing stage where the real money is being spent and the clock is ticking and the budget is depleting by hour, just have everything prepared so you know what you want. So you're just doing the fine tuning and you're not making gigantic important decisions at the last minute on the mixing stage, because that would drive me nuts.
Yeah, mixing is much more expensive than editing.
Yeah.
As Ben Burt says, films are not released, they escape.
Yes, and it's
You just yank them away when it's time to show them to the public.
When they finally are yanked away, you want to feel good about it. You don't want to feel sick to your stomach thinking, oh my God, there's so much stuff that we didn't get done. It's not. And I've had that feeling too, whether it's with my second film, having to, go to the Cannes Film Festival when it's not finished and you're just out of time and you're out of money, and literally you're out of time and you're out of money and you have to go to a film festival and you can't pull the movie out because that would be a PR, nightmare. And the fact that you've been invited to the film festival is like a miracle. Like that everyone is, saying the movie's a complete disaster, and then we get into Cannes and everything. We have to do the best we can and go with what we can. So sometimes the movie is literally not finished when you have to show it to people, just because you don't have enough money, you don't have enough time, and the producers are sort of like, sorry, we're not going to give you any more money. You just do the best you can. That's it. I've never had that luxury of like having a studio just continue to, let the ATM machine spew out. I have not had that luxury before, I hope to one day, but again, be as prepared as possible and have everything to spend so much time in the pre-editing process so that when you're on that mixing stage and the money is being spent, you're really just fine-tuning things as much as possible so you can get to that finish line, close to 99.9%.
That's really insightful, Richard. I was curious too, just, obviously we can't talk about the sound of this film without really going into Mad World and how important that song is to the film. It just so perfectly captures the essence of the story. And I was curious from your perspective, Richard, like what you remember about how that song came together and how you figured out where it was going to be placed in the cut.
Well, it happened really fast. We were recording the score with Michael Andrews in the Hollywood Hills in his home studio. It was a very, very low budget. It was not a budget for the score for this movie at all. So he was doing a lot of the instruments himself. Just a few violins, a few cellos, and the synth 80s synth Moog stuff. All these old vintage instruments that he was using in his home studio in the Hollywood Hills. And he said, I have a friend named Gary Jules, who does this really lovely cover of Tears for Fears' Mad World. And because we already had Head Over Heels in the school scene, which was really married to the movie. We didn't have the rights yet, but we had it in the movie. And he's like, there's the song Mad World, and it's very fast paced, and it's a more obscure B-side from the same era, but he does a ballad version of it. And he used to sing it in coffee shops down in San Diego. So he can drive up here and we can record it, and I do a piano thing, and he started playing it for me. This sounds great. Gary drove up. It was recorded in like 3 hours. And then he did it just happened really fast. And he did the strings and added in the strings. And I was there when he added in the strings. And it was like homemade. It was literally just like three or four people homemaking a little song. It was not some big production, expensive thing. It was like literally just handcrafted and very simple. And just, I was like, it's going in the movie, and it got moved a little bit. I think it was at the end credits at Sundance. And then we moved it back over the montage. And then we really barely had to re-edit the montage at all. We added James Duvall to it, where he touches his eye and you see the mask, the mold of the rabbit mask at the end. But it just sort of laid into the movie really beautifully. And, again, this was, people weren't really doing this sort of slow ballad cover of a pop song that we hear it in like trailers. They do it also all over all sorts of movies and trailers and the different songs now. But this was sort of like no one was really doing that yet. And I got to give Michael Andrews, our composer, and Gary Jules the credit for it was really all their idea. I was just the guy who was like, yes, this is working. Absolutely. And when it comes to music, I make my decisions very, very decisively. Whether it's working or it's not, it's just a gut feeling. I don't kind of like him and there's certain things that I'll tweak into the last minute song selection stuff, but for the most part, I know if a song is working or if it's not. And sometimes you have too much music, you need to pull some stuff out. Sometimes, you can't clear a song. You just the band just won't say the record label or there's two members of the band that don't talk to each other or they just want too much money. But I've been very blessed with all the musicians that we've worked with for a lot of the music that I've licensed for all of my movies. And so I've been very blessed. And
did your editor cut to the rhythm of the songs?
Yeah, to Tears for Fears. Yeah, we had to cut that sequence together really fast because we were shooting basically a music video the first week of photography where no one is talking, none of the actors are talking. It's basically a 2-minute sequence of the movie where no one is delivering dialogue. It's basically a music video. And so the line producer was just like, why you're wasting half a day on this? You're never going to make it. This is not even going to make it into the movie. They were not happy. So I had the editors, I had them cut it together as quickly as possible and rush a tape to set so I could show them a cut of the Tears for Fears sequence, the high school hallway sequence. It was the Friday lunch of the first week of photography. I had a cut of it to show the whole crew. I brought them into my little trailer with my little VHS player and I showed it to them and you could just see everyone like, oh, okay. They all got it. They saw what it was. And then I was in. I was like, they were on my wavelength and they knew that I had a vision. And it was like, if you can just show people, if there's something that you can just show at the end of the first week of a movie, you can have your editors cut together something for everyone's morale so they know that it's coming together and it's not a disaster, so they can just see something. So that's my lesson, is always have something ready by lunchtime on Friday.
That's
great. It also helps get people on your side, in your corner on your side, because they can see the vision for themselves. They're not just like relying on you to be right or something.
The battery on my laptop is about to die. I have 2% left. I'm gonna try to log in with my phone here, so if my screen goes black, it's because there's no plug. I've been looking around this restaurant for a plug and it's literally like across the entire room, and I don't have a cord long enough to make it. So I'm going to try to plug in my phone and give you guys a little bit more time. So
you're not in LA when there's not a plug in.
No. Everyone's being really nice here. The place is almost closed and they haven't kicked me out yet.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll let you right back in, Richard, if you jump back in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, why don't we jump to some questions for the rest of you all? Vickie, can you recall, just like way back at the beginning, do you remember how you met Richard and initially came aboard the film?
Good question. I think I was at Wilshire Stages working on something else, and I forget if they were editing there or not, but I think we ran in, I think I was suggested by somebody there, but I don't remember. But I was happy to be able to do it because it was a pretty groundbreaking movie. And, every movie is a different challenge in some way. And I love solving problems, whether it's, sound wise or writing or directing, because I'm doing those more now. But I love solving problems. Like, okay, here's the issue. How best do we fix it? Do we look for alternate takes that aren't the director's choice for an ADR issue, or do we ADR it because maybe we'll get something? Sometimes we have to do both at the same time because of schedules. Like it would be my choice to go through all the production sound and try to fix it, the given of what it is. And then if I couldn't do that, then resort to ADR, unless ADR was what the director wanted most of all anyway. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but we don't have the scheduled time to do that. So I'm sure actors, I don't know, I've worked with many actors who get very frustrated in coming to loop something that they don't think is broken, they don't think is, and I always say, I will try my best to fix this, but we have to do this anyway, just in case, and I hope that suffices for them, because I know for Beth, I mean, you must be frustrating to like have your performance change. I mean, yeah, the ball's in your court on the ADR stage to, recreate it, but there's always something delicious and gold about production sound, I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years and it's like, there's just something.
Doesn't bother me. I mean, I sometimes I can't hear the problem. That's the only time that when I don't understand, usually.
Oh, that's because sound editors tell you, oh, there's a problem. You can't hear it, but it's there. That's their reason.
Yeah.
That's the way we get you to do some ADR.
I have exquisite ears. I really do. And as I say, I love sound so much. And so once I understand, what the director needs, what you guys need, I love it. It's fun for me, honestly.
Oh, good.
I like that. And I love the rhythm. I think it's musical, I know Patrick Swayze was very good at looping, and I can't say I'm as good as he was, but do you remember him coming in, Richard or Vickie? Did he come in to loop at all? Because he's sort of like well known for that, because he was a dancer, so he could hear the music of it. Sometimes
musicians and dancers have really good timing but also some actors, when they're in a part, like I've had actors come in and say, I can't believe I said it that fast. What was I thinking? Like, just like, blah, 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 blah. And then they're trying to loop that and they're like, I don't know how to recreate that,
Yeah.
But
Actually,
somebody asked, John Tompkins said, would Beth have pointers for us sound people in ways to make you more comfortable doing ADR, to better help us help you, I think is what it says.
Gosh, it seems like everybody always does what I need, which is I like to get the lines ahead of time if I can. I don't mind if some are thrown in at the last minute, but I do like to, at least be able to remember the voice I was using, because I'm a character actress and I use a lot of different voices and takes a little recall. No, I find the experience wonderful. I can't say that I ever remember having a bad ADR experience, really.
Do you get to see a cut of the film before you come in for looping? No. Yeah,
Sometimes
no, most people don't.
People will, send me something so that ahead of time. I have gotten clips ahead of time, especially now, because as you say, the technology is so much better now. They can send me a link and I go, oh, this is what we're doing. Right. But no,
because us sound people, we're hearing these lines over and over. We know every nuance, we know every syllable. Like sometimes I count the syllables for somebody and they'll say, no, I think I only had like 5 wows. I said, no, you had 6, because I can slow it down and listen to it. But
I would say less is more with me. If you want to know, less is more with me. Let me play, let me be creative. And I did think of one thing. Well, if I think of it, I'll come back. My brain at this time of night, believe it or not, 8 o'clock is late for me these days.
No problem. Richard, can you hear us?
Yes. Sorry about having to redo everything. Can you hear me?
Oh, no. Yeah, we can hear you great. Here's a question, Richard, just as a director, looking back, I'm just curious what you've learned over the course of your career about the power of sound in helping tell your stories.
It is just an enormous part of the canvas of the experience of your film. It's literally 50% visual, 50% audio. And I think some people diminish sound, to a much smaller piece of the pie, the Trivial Pursuit wedges, they don't give it half the wedges, but it is so incredibly important. And I just think pre-visualization is something that it's visual. Everyone talks about previs, and I'm doing previs right now, and I'm doing Photoshop, like maxing out the RAM on my computer with Photoshop and stuff, but I'm doing all the sound too. I'm doing previs sound just as much in Photoshop, believe it or not. And yes, it's not as good as the sound in like Adobe Premiere and stuff, but it's good enough where I literally have hundreds and hundreds of tracks in my previs, And I'm doing just as much sound previs as I am doing visual previs. All-viz, audio viz. I don't know. Like it's free audio. I don't know, but it's so important to start to workshop the landscape of what your movie is going to sound like. And it's not just music. It's not just the songs or the pop songs or the temp score or the composer that you hope to work with. It is just the sound design and the vibe of the movie and and sometimes it's just starting at the beginning. It's like doing the sound design for the opening sequence of your movie, or just how things begin, what does the opening scene sound like? What is the atmospherics? It's so important. It's so important to just previs as much as possible, because we have all this technology. I mean, just hearing Vickie talk about all this new technology that exists, that didn't exist back then, and it's a blessing. It can be a curse to have too much technology, because then you're just changing everything, you're just constantly playing around and messing around, and you're not locking into anything. But you gotta use all these technological tools that you have at your disposal on your MacBook Pro or even on your iPhone. And you can just get so much work done in advance of going into production when they're spending the real money, where you already know what you want. You already know what your movie sounds like, or what you want it to sound like. So you're spending the time, and you're not wasting Vickie's time or wasting all your other sound teams, wasting all their time just because trying things that you haven't figured out yet. So the more work you can do in advance, the more important it is.
So you say Photoshop has like previs storyboards? Is that what you're using?
It's animation. It's all tons of stuff. But Photoshop is such a powerful tool now. You can do editing. You can do you can't do full blown 3D and lighting and stuff. You can do some 3D, but I figured out a way to use it pretty much to get so far along with it before I bring the project into After Effects or Premiere or any of the more advanced Adobe technologies. But they all integrate together, and they all work together.
Isn't there like a thing called FrameForge, which is like a previs storyboarding?
Oh yeah, there's that. I'm just doing it all with Photoshop, to be honest. There's tons of softwares, but they're about to shut down this restaurant that I'm at, so if I have to leave in a couple minutes, I apologize. They're about to kick me out.
Richard, then I'll squeeze in one last question with you before you got to run. Just as the director and writer, director, creator of this universe, this film, what do you hope is the lasting impression that people have of this film all this many years later?
That it's okay to take risks, that it's okay to push the envelope. Again, when we made this movie, there's a lot of people who thought it was a disaster, that it was unreleasable, it was not marketable, that it was just that it would never even get to theaters. It barely got to theaters, but just got to 50 theaters. And then 9/11 happened. It came out 6 weeks after 9/11. It was just like this movie barely, by the skin of its teeth, barely survived. It almost got sent, this was before streaming. It would have been buried at like a home video release. All the 80s music would have been trashed. The movie would have been cut down to 90. It would have been destroyed. It almost got destroyed. So it barely survived. So just some things are worth fighting for, and you have to pick your battles. You got to really focus on what's most important to fight for. So you don't want to be fighting with people. You don't want to constantly be pushing against people, but sometimes to push, sometimes you need to like fight for things that you believe in, but just be savvy and articulate and respectful when I don't even like to use the word fighting, but when you're pushing and you believe in something, you don't give up.
Yeah, and it's like Beth said, collaboration is the key. I mean, filmmaking is all about collaboration. We can't do it by ourselves. We need input. We need bouncing ideas off people and try this, try that, filmmaking by committee. No.
Yeah, collaboration is so important.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's so important. Yeah.
Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I was just going to say that I've been around so long that I never hesitate to offer an idea or something, but I can remember the day when I was too afraid to offer ideas. And, sometimes I think that we miss out if we don't listen to each other, and when we go into a ADR stage, it sometimes feels very technical, what's being asked of us. Whereas we're coming from a very organic place, internal place from the character. And so even if our suggestion that we make as actors is wrong and doesn't work, if we're allowed to make those suggestions, we might find something together that's better than either one of us thought of. So I know that's the definition of collaboration, but I just wanted to say that. So that's when it's really fun for me.
Yeah.
You guys, I have to sign off here, but thank you so much. This has been really fun. Beth, it's so great to see you. Vickie, so
Love
great
you.
to see you. Thank you guys so
good to
much.
See you too.
Okay.
Thank you
Stay
so
in
much,
touch.
Richard. Really
Stay in touch.
appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you. That was Richard Kelly, the writer-director of Donnie Darko. So generous to join us.
So sweet. I'm glad he took all that muscle memory of sound stuff with him all these years. That's really good to know. You know,
Absolutely.
besides collaborating, we try to not influence, but affect people, because then it, rising tide lifts all boats, right?
That's right.
So we can.
I'm going to go too. I have had a migraine all day. I didn't want to complain. And now everybody's going, oh, brother, listen to the old lady. But this has been wonderful. I didn't expect to enjoy it half as much as I have. I just have learned a lot and I appreciate it so much. Thanks for including me.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you for making the time and for joining us.
It's so great to see you as always.
It's just terrific that you do these events. I'm going to watch for your Twitters. So we're all leaving Twitter, right?
Thank you so much, Beth.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, we'll continue with Vickie, who's the supervising sound editor of the film.
Yeah, you just got me now.
So Vickie, question for you. This was, as Richard spoke to many times, this is a pretty low budget indie film before it got sold. I was curious what the impact of that was on you and on, if you noticed it anywhere, like, cracks in the system, like the production sound or timing, schedule and budget and scope for post for you on this film.
It's, I tend to work the same, whether I'm getting paid nothing, because I do that for people sometimes, friends who have a film, hey, can you do the sound? Or I get paid big bucks, and it doesn't matter to me because it's my name on the screen and it has to be good no matter what. It's like, that's why you don't have much of a life, or you don't see your kids growing up, because you're only as good as your last movie, and I like to pride myself on doing quality work no matter what the budget is. So, if the budget calls for a 10-hour day and you have to do it in a 12-hour day, it's like to keep, I've never understood people who say, well, it's a low budget film, so I bring my low budget editing. It's like, I don't understand that. I really don't. So, I didn't notice any kind of low budget thing except for maybe the, temp visual effects that we had to work off of. Hoping that the final product, because we didn't really see the final product of the visual effects, like the spears and stuff, till the very, very end of the film. And we're like, do you think this will work? And sometimes the visual effects people have to accommodate our sound work, instead of the other way around. But, again, it's a collaboration, and, we're all on the same movie, trying to get it done in time and have it be good. So it's interesting that it did happen after 9/11. I really blanked that out.
Yeah, just the final release of it, I guess,
Yeah.
I'm sure had an impact on just how successful it was at the initial box office. You mentioned visual effects, like did you get early like concept art and any sort of like sense of what the visuals would look like very early on?
Yeah, sometimes they just put in drawings, like here's the shot, like a storyboard. And we have to imagine the animation of it and do it that way. I mean, the mixer on the, when we're mixing, he could move things left to right. We don't do that in editing. We just present the material and then they can kind of place it where they want. I kind of liken it to, in baking a cake, we get all the ingredients and the editor mixes all the ingredients together. We put it in a pan and then we hand it over to the mixer who bakes it, I mean, it's a little more involved with that. Of course, the mixer would have a different story. They'd probably say, well, we took out some of those things that you put in the cake and we put in our, but everybody's, for the film. I just, really remember fondly about, making something different. It was definitely a different type of movie, you know, watching experience and as well as editing. So, and I don't remember if they made a whole lot of changes or, I think, because it's low budget, you try to, do as little, changes as possible, because to conform all the elements that go into making a film, the Foley, the ADR, the backgrounds, the sound effects, the music, is a big deal to conform, especially because we weren't, I forget if we were on digital at that point. Some of them were kind of doing half and half, digital, half analog. And to conform all that is a big process. So low budgets, we say locked picture, or we charge you per change.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I just upon rewatching the movie, it stuck out to me just how important the sound of thunder was to this story. It's like the first thing we hear under the opening credits over black, and it comes back quite a few times in the film. When we see the wormhole in the distance. I was curious if you remember how this idea for thunder came about, and what your team's approach was to that.
Well, I think it was something that Richard, mentioned, because, there's some sound effects that are obvious when you watch a film. We call it, see a dog, hear a dog type of editing. And then there's other things that may not even be in the script, because sometimes we look at the script first and we try to gather ideas about the sound based on the script. Then when we get the film, we base it on the film itself. And, thunder is a very evocative sound. It can be melancholic. It could be dangerous, so it's like the type of thunder that you choose. I know we had a rolling thunder in the beginning because it was that panoramic vista that he was talking about, the mountains. And so, we could really move the thunder across the whole, scope of the image. And yeah, he just wanted that thunder because it's a precursor to the danger, and the swirling, winds and all that stuff. I mean, we typically don't have a lot of thunder in Southern California, but when we do, it's pretty dramatic. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I wanted to circle back to, we were talking a little bit about Frank's voice, the bunny, earlier. And you mentioned Mike Payne's response to how he approached that with Metasynth and pitching the voice and moving around to surround. We also got to chat with Chris David, the re-recording mixer of this film, before this event. And I'd like to play a little clip of him answering how he approached using manipulating Frank's voice for the mix here as well.
Yes,
So I'm going to share.
That'd be great. Yeah, Chris is living in Paris now, so it was a lot of coordination getting the timing right to get him on here.
Yes.
So, oh, good.
All right, here we go. Jump back and forth, like you said.
Yeah, obviously, particularly in those moments where he's out there in conversation with the rabbit, and the rabbit voice sound, hopefully you watch this in the cinema, because it's a wide, spatial, all-embracing, completely surround you, like, where is this guy? I have no idea who's talking to me. And then when his sister comes in the door, buff, back to reality. Gone, all that stereospatial stuff. We're back on the screen, and backgrounds are normal, and blah blah blah. But the rabbit voice sound we worked on quite a bit. I think what we initially came up with between sort of Mike Payne and myself, and actually did work pretty well for Richard right off the bat, and we just sort of talked our way through to maybe a slightly grander version of that rabbit voice. Interestingly, that was one of the things that Sam Levinson picked up on, because he was such a such a Donnie Darko fan, and was one of the things that he mentioned to me when we talked about Donnie Darko, that he was like, "Oh, that rabbit voice." I need you to do this with, and Chris, can we just fuck this scene up a little bit more, because really what we did with Richard and the rabbit voice was a little bit that way. I mean, obviously you've got to maintain dialogue intelligibility, but at the same time, that rabbit voice it doesn't come from the screen. It comes from somewhere else around you, and you don't know where it is, and it's like in your head, and it's in his head, and that was the whole idea of that voice.
So that was Chris David, the
Yeah.
re-recording mixer of the film, and where he took your elements, Vickie, from your team.
Yeah, it's cool. Films are meant to be seen in a theater. I know it was hard the last few years with COVID and everything. We ended up trying to judge sound movies on our home television sets, for like Oscar consideration. And to really feel the experience of a film in a theater is a unique experience, because it's, like he said, we were trying to make it, and it had liquid. I remember it had, we put some liquid sound in it too, to make it kind of wobbly, so that we wanted to make it so that it was in Donnie Darko's head, that it was coming from, but not, it's like it's in his head, but it's outside of him, and that was kind of the theme of the film too. Like, some people plant Easter eggs in movies in the form of story points or plot points or something. We do it with sound as well. We hide things in the sound, not like the Wilhelm scream, but for those of you who know the Wilhelm scream, but to foreshadow, you'd have to watch it over a couple times to really get it, but it's on a subconscious level, and that's where sound affects us, on a subconscious level. Yes, we need the clarity of the words. We need to feel the environment that we're in, that we've created for this character, whether it's insular or expansive, and so much depends on the size of the frame and how it's shot. There's so many different things, that go into it on a subconscious level, but we're the ones that are pulling those strings for the audience to feel it more than hear it,
Absolutely. Especially, I think, on a film like this, because like subjectivity is so essential to this film. I asked Chris David a little bit about that too, but just how he differentiated the world, the sort of real world from Donnie's inner world, and how he approached those shifts. So I'd love to play a clip from him about that too, and then hear your thoughts
yes,
too. Vickie.
Please. Yes.
Well, I felt that we popped in and out of reality very significantly, and that in a large number of instances in the film, we pop back into reality. Boof, backgrounds, reality, everything's normal. But we had just come out of a sequence in which it was all spacey and music, and really probably no backgrounds playing at all, footsteps, nothing, no reality. And I think that the whole sort of nature of the film is one in which we're examining a character who is living in a real world that we visit a number of times, a lot of times, but actually is living in a completely different universe to the rest of the world. And so we're constantly moving between these two, and the degree to which we move is changes. You know, sometimes it's fairly modest, but other times it's very significant, and then we can get to a very significant sort of headspace kind of whoa, and bang right out of it back into a very real sound. And I think we sort of in and outed of that a lot throughout the movie. And I think that was totally the correct choice.
Vickie, I was curious, just following up on that idea. I mean, like you were in charge of editorial for this sort of subjective, heavily subjective film. Like, how did you approach it from the beginning before handing it off to Chris?
Just editorial ways. Well, we had like a team of background editors and sound effects editors that had to work together with Mike, in design. I mean, there's sound effects editing, and then there's like designing, which is a more, elaborate way of sound editing. Yeah, I think I remember having a discussion about whether we should pop in and out that hard. So we tried it both ways. We did a mix where, here, let's see if this works. Like, do we want to give it away that this is in his head, this is reality, and is it that obvious, and obviously the hard in and a hard out kind of won. But I think if I watch the film again with that in mind, I might find that the beginning was more flowing, not as hard cut. It wasn't till like when he has the dream about flooding the school and the bunny's telling him Frank's telling him what to do, that it's like, where in the movie do you start guessing that there's something seriously wrong with this kid, and are we going backwards in time, and the whole, Sparrow, Grandma Sparrow or whatever, Sparrow death, Grandma death, and her time travel ideas, and is Donnie just following that, or is it real, or is it in his head? I mean, it's our job to put those feelings across to the audience. So so I think the hard in and our hard outs are the ones that won over.
Yeah, I especially remember there was one moment in a bathroom scene where Donnie's, very in the zone talking to Frank in the bathroom, and
his hand in the
his hand is up, and suddenly, his sister's at the door and interrupts him and says, like, what are you doing? And he snaps right out of it, and sound, I'm sure, had to accommodate for that too, because like Donnie turns his attention to suddenly reality out of the dream world or world with Frank.
You figure there's, and some of this stuff you cannot think about it ahead of time. I mean, you can ponder it and you can guess what it is, but until you actually have the film in your hand or on your computer now, and you try things and you see what, because it's all accidents. It's all a bunch of happy accidents. I think sound editing is a bunch of happy accidents. I mean, there's the dialogue that you gotta hear, because that's where the story is. But the other stuff is like dessert, it's the cherry on top. It's and there's so much that goes on that the regular audience has no idea of all the subtleties that we put into these layers. I mean, they're looking at the screen, so here's picture, right? Here's the picture, and then the sound is like all over the place, doing things, drawing your attention over here, tapping your ear in the back of your head. The hairs on your neck stand up from something, goosebumps and music. And it's a very orchestrated process that we like to fool everybody with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Vickie, I wanted to close out with a question for you. I mean, you mentioned that your career has been 40 plus years at this point, and this film, stands the test of time, as we've talked about here.
It kind of fell right in the middle. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. Time-wise. So what, for you, what ultimately made working on this film so special for you compared to other projects you've been a part of? And we have an answer from Chris that I'll play after, but I most, first and foremost, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Probably because it was so innovative. I mean, let's see, 2000, I was trying to think of the other movies around that. You know, it was a very innovative film, and I loved working with a first-time director, you know, who I could sort of shape in some ways with my own sound sensibilities and hopefully influence. It sounds like I did that today, besides USC class, but it sounds like, you know, and I love that. It is really about the collaboration, and, you know, the film is just so innovative and different. And it had different problems to solve than other films, like the voices and the whole theme of the film. I don't want to spoil it in case anybody hadn't seen the movie. Probably everybody has, and I don't know if they have any more specific questions than what they put in the chat here, but happy to answer anything anybody has. But yeah, I liked that it was just unusual, and it was, what can I say? It wasn't like a polished studio film. You know, there was a rawness to it from everybody. I mean, the actors, from Richard's directing to, you know, the themes of it. It was very, I don't know, it was very heartfelt and real. I guess that's, you know, it felt very raw to me. I remember feeling like at the end when Jenna Malone and she waves to the mom, and you're like, wait a minute, did they converge in a different universe too? How do they know? You know, like just a little hint of it. It's like a recognition of pre-travel or time travel versus forward time. I mean, I can't even explain it now, you know. But
yeah, it's so creatively written and created by all of you. I'm going to share Chris's response to this too, just about his, you know, sort
Okay.
of parting thoughts about the film too. Here, 1 second.
Okay.
It was just such an innovative piece of work, and I was just sort of blown away really by what Richard had managed to
Tomorrow.
not only what he managed to write.
It's
and
going to be
direct,
sunny tomorrow, I
but
heard. Oh, let me check.
what a
See where we're
brilliant
at here.
cast he got together. I love, you know, there's a bunch of actors in there who I think are just perfect for their parts, and you know, not just 2 or 3 of them in there. There's a dozen in there who I think just perfect, and so it was really a treat to do this. It for me, and the way my mind works, it was really an exercise in mixing sound in an exciting, expressive, 8-dimensional way that I'm not normally asked to. And we weren't interrupted by producers telling me that they couldn't understand that line, and we had to re-record this ADR because things didn't, you know, it doesn't make sense. Yes, of course it doesn't make sense. I love that it doesn't make sense, but let's please not put an ADR line that goes, well, of course, in the beginning, no. So we were freed from so many of that stuff. You know, my hat's off to Richard. I think he did an amazing job, and I'm sorry that I can't be on the Zoom with y'all, because that would be really nice. I haven't seen him in a long time, and but I'm sure you'll get a lot more out of him, and so enjoy that.
That was Chris David sharing his thoughts on just how much he enjoyed and seemed to be challenged by this film. I wonder if it was like that for you too, Vickie. Did you feel like this was a big challenge to make this film?
It was challenging in a good way. You know, like, as I said, I like to solve problems and figure out what's the best way to tell the story and pull it out from the director. Like, you know, tell me about your feelings about it, because, you know, people can't really articulate about sound too much because it's such a mysterious element in filmmaking. But if you could tell me how you want people to feel, And do you want them to feel scared? Do you want them to feel like be always questioning, who is this Frank? Is he really seen? I mean, we've seen Harvey, we've seen rabbits and imagine as imaginary characters in films, but how do we want to feel about things? And that's the tricky part. I think I mentioned before we came on about sound is very subjective, and it's really geared to the person's taste in listening to it. Although sometimes I've had arguments or discussions with directors about like, okay, how important is this for it to sound this way to you versus the audience, so it's I mean, every film is challenging, but you want something that when you're done with it, the filmmaker said, yeah, that's how I envisioned it, although I couldn't say it, like, it when you hear it. You don't always know how to get it that way. That's why you hire people who know how to do that for you, to get you those sounds, and keep working on it till it's right. It's like, my motto of sound is, if it sounds good, it is good, and if it doesn't sound good, that means you're not done yet. You keep doing it until it sounds right. Is it going to sound right if you have ADR versus production? Is the production, the performance, will people forgive the noise under the performance if the performance is that good? Or is it going to be distracting? If an audience doesn't hear a line of dialogue and they're taken out of the film and they turn to their friend they're with in the theater and go, what did he say? What, did you hear that? Then you've lost them. So sometimes I tell directors, if you want that to happen, then sure, leave in your production line that nobody can understand. Or, they say, oh, it's a throwaway line. It doesn't matter if they understand. It's like, that, but the audience hearing it first time through doesn't know that. So, we don't want to hand it to them like on a silver platter or, answer every question imaginable, but we want to make it so it's an enjoyable experience, and challenging experience. We don't want them to have to strain, like to hear words where you're not in a theater, you can't rewind and listen to it again, so as James Cameron always says, clarity is king.
Yeah,
for him to say that, that's a big thing, So,
absolutely. Well, I think, this film is just so evocative and inspiring, and clearly stands the test of time. Vickie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing so many stories about working on this very special film.
Thank you, Eric. It was great. And if anybody has any questions, I guess they can send them to you, and you can send them to me, and I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm accessible, as a lot of that I see on the chat.
Yes, they can find Vickie. I'm sure they can find you on social media and Facebook and whatnot.
Sure. I'm there.
Vickie, thank you again. Thank you everyone for coming to this very special Sound Advice event. We hope to see you next time.
Yeah, it's fun to have the the director and an actor, because just to be involved in the sound process, I find is refreshing too. Because they should know, every filmmaker should know, what it entails, and the power of sound that you can access. So hire good production mixers. That's my number one suggestion, so that you have something to edit with. So
absolutely.
Everything else is dessert, cherry on top.
Exactly.